In this lecture, we will continue our discussion to understand how contingency funds and time buffers are used to manage risks on a project. Contingency funds are established to cover both identified and unknown project risks, though the exact timing and amount of expenditures are uncertain until the risk event occurs. Some project owners are hesitant to set up these funds, seeing them as indicative of a flawed plan or as a slush fund. Overcoming this reluctance involves documenting risk identification, assessment, contingency plans, and procedures for fund disbursement. The size of contingency funds depends on project uncertainty, including factors like newness, inaccurate estimates, technical unknowns, and scope instability. Typical contingencies range from 1 to 10% for familiar projects, but can be 20 to 60% for unique, high-technology projects. Contingency funds are usually divided into contingency reserves for identified risks and management reserves for unidentified risks. Contingency reserves are allocated to specific segments, while management reserves cover overall project risks. These reserves require different levels of approval and are only used when risks materialize. Contingency allowances should be separate from original time and cost estimates to avoid misuse and ensure accurate control. Contingency reserves are allocated for specific work packages or segments within the baseline budget or work breakdown structure. For instance, a reserve might be set aside for computer coding to address potential issues identified during testing. These reserves, determined by costing out accepted contingency or recovery plans, should be communicated to the project team to foster trust and encourage good cost performance. If the identified risk does not materialize, the reserve funds are removed, causing the contingency reserves to decrease as the project progresses. Management reserves are designed to cover major unforeseen risks affecting the entire project, such as unexpected scope changes. Established after contingency reserves, these reserves are managed by the project manager and the project's owner, who could be top management or an external party. Management reserves are determined based on historical data and judgments about the project's uniqueness and complexity. Technical reserves are a special category within management reserves, used for unforeseen technical risks associated with new or innovative processes. Since these risks are beyond the project manager's control, technical reserves are managed by the project owner or top management. These funds are intended as a fallback plan and are rarely used, with decisions about their use made by the owner and project manager when necessary. This graph illustrates the development of a budget estimate for a hypothetical project. It provides a detailed view of the budget baseline, along with the reserves allocated for each project activity. Each activity is assigned a specific budget, and additional contingency reserves are set aside to address potential risks associated with that activity. In addition to these contingency reserves, the graph includes a management reserve. This reserve is allocated to cover unforeseen risks that affect the overall project but are not specific to individual activities. The graph clearly distinguishes between contingency and management reserves, which facilitates easier tracking and control. By keeping these reserves separate, it becomes simpler to monitor their usage and ensure that funds are available when needed, enhancing overall budget management and project stability. Time buffers, like contingency funds, cushion against potential project delays and are allocated based on project uncertainty. More uncertain projects require larger time buffers, which are strategically added to critical activities, merge points prone to delays, non-critical tasks to avoid creating new critical paths, and activities with scarce resources. Buffers may also be added to the end of the project, such as a 30-day buffer for a 300-working-day project. This additional time does not appear on the schedule but is available if needed and typically requires top management approval.